President Ruto. President Ruto here. President.
Excellencies will now sing the national anthems of both the countries.
It is a privilege for me to join you in this joint business forum between Kenya and South Africa, a gathering that reflects both the deepening bond between our two nations and our shared resolve to shape Africa's economic future through partnership, enterprise, and integration. I'm informed that today's engagement have been candid, rich, and forward-looking. My hope is that we leave here with concrete opportunities. We've had good intentions, but we must consolidate them into deals. From where I sit, I see two complementary economies with combined power to drive Africa's transformation. Kenya and South Africa stand among our continent's foremost economic anchors. South Africa is one of Africa's premier industrial and financial powerhouses, while Kenya is the gateway to East and Central Africa that is propelled by a dynamic private sector, a thriving digital innovation ecosystem, and strategic infrastructure. Our partnership advances steadily across trade, investment, tourism, aviation, and most importantly, manufacturing, financial services, ICT, and logistics. Your Excellencies, Kenya and South Africa are also poised to shape Africa's digital future. Kenya leads the continent in fintech, mobile money, and digital financial inclusion, while South Africa hosts one of Africa's most sophisticated capital markets. Together, we can pioneer partnerships in artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, digital infrastructure, e-commerce, and cross-border payments. You already know that we have the Pan-African payment settlement system that can help business people across our continent not to be stuck with foreign exchange, challenges. That you can be paid in whatever currency, so long as our central banks are connected through the Pan-African payment system that is underwritten by Afreximbank. These are avenues that make trade, business, and enterprises move faster. Kenya is fast becoming a premier destination for global business services and business process outsourcing. With a young, educated, English-speaking workforce, competitive costs, robust digital infrastructure, and a time zoning bridging Europe, the Middle East, and Africa, Kenya is an ideal platform for scalable service delivery. I invite South African and multinational enterprises to make Kenya their regional global business service hub, uniting talent, technology, and market access under one competitive ecosystem. Infrastructure and connectivity remain central to unlocking intra-African trade. Kenya's port of Mombasa and the Lamu Port South Sudan-Ethiopia transport corridor link East Africa and Central Africa to global markets, while South Africa's world-class ports in Durban, Cape Town, Nkura, and Richards Bay anchor trade across the South. United, these corridors can strengthen East-South connectivity, expand intra-African trade under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area and position both nations as logistics hubs for the continent. The Africa Continental Free Trade Area is among the greatest economic opportunities of our generation. The platform that will turn fragmented markets into a single competitive bloc capable of industrializing our economies, attracting investment, and creating jobs. Listening to the private sector actors break down what is going on at the East African community, what is going on at SADC, what is going on in COMESA, and the coming together of the three blocs through the tripartite agreement, which came into force. But now we need greater implementation, acceleration actually of implementation. We have offered to host the headquarters in Kenya of the TFTA so that we can provide momentum and provide the ecosystem for the integration of our markets so that we can unlock this huge potential of 800 million people market. And we build, of course, into the bigger market of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. Yet, intra-Africa trade remains far below global average. We've been given numbers here. Intra-Asian trade is at close to 60. Intra-European trade is close to 70. Intra-African trade is at 17. The region that has progressed the most in intra-regional trade is the East African community. But we're still way below where we should be. In other words, what the numbers tell us is we are struggling looking for markets very far from our continent, when actually the market in our continent is virgin. The intra-Africa trade deficit remains far below the global average, as I have said, and that is precisely why partnerships such as ours between Kenya and South Africa matters. Transformation begins right there. Together, our two nations command the financial strength, industrial capacity, entrepreneurial talent, and innovation ecosystem to power not just intra-Africa trade, but the transformation of our continent. We must move beyond conventional trade and deliberately build integrated regional value chains in manufacturing, agriculture, mining, logistics, pharmaceuticals, energy, digital services, and green industrialization. Listening to the actors here earlier, we seem to be speaking in compartments. We must make what happens in South Africa stimulate what happens in Kenya, and vice versa. And policymakers, President Ramaphosa and myself, can do so much. But where the rubber meets the road is at the business level. You are the people who can move numbers. You are the people who can move figures. Changing these figures requires the private sector. And that is why on a state visit like this, it doesn't end with government. We have made it deliberate and intentional that after we have signed all the MOUs, we have agreed on all the policy frameworks, the private sector must be the engine that brings the MOUs, the policies into reality. And I want to say I commend the steady cooperation under our Joint Commission for Cooperation and Joint Trade Committee, which remain vital platforms for resolving trade matters and advancing our shared agenda. We must now ensure full implementation of their outcome so that businesses and investors feel tangible benefits. Today's discussions reveal opportunity across every strategic sector. In manufacturing, Kenya's industrial parks, special economic zones, and export processing zones offer ready platforms for regional partnerships, serving African markets under the Africa Continental Free Trade Area. South Africa's strength in automotive production, pharmaceuticals, mining, chemicals, and steel complement Kenya's rise as a regional production and logistics hub. Let us collaborate boldly in the automotive assembly, mineral beneficiation, agro-processing, and green manufacturing. There are real and tangible opportunities there. In agriculture, our strengths are remarkably complementary. Kenya, a global leader in tea, horticulture, fresh produce, and dairy. South Africa, a master of food processing, logistics, and retail. This is complementary. Africa cannot keep spending billions in importing food while our own farmers and agro-industries stand ready to feed the continent. We must invest decisively in agro-processing, cold chain logistics, irrigation, packaging, and supply chains that connect African producers to African markets. Closer cooperation in aviation, rail, warehousing, and cargo handling will sharpen the efficiency of trade across Africa. In this spirit, I commend the strategic partnership between Kenya Airways and South African Airways. Their success will not only connect our people, but also deepen trade, tourism, investment, and regional business integration. Governments can build enabling environment, set policy direction, and invest in infrastructure. But it is the private sector that drives transformation. Africa's future will be written by bold entrepreneurs, innovative firms, and strategic investors willing to back the continent's long-term promise. In the meeting we had in Nairobi, I think we made a very clear appeal to our private sector. Before we look for investors from Europe and America and Asia, the private sector in our continent must take the lead. Yes. You do not expect somebody from thousands upon thousands of kilometers to come to South Africa and appreciate and understand the nuances of what goes on here. It is you, the private sector here, who must take the lead, build alliance, build joint ventures, so that you can help us crowd in investments and bring others to invest in our region. Today, more than 60 South African companies operate in Kenya, in the banking sector, in insurance, retail, manufacturing, telecommunication, infrastructure, and some of them in real estate. South Africa remains among the leading sources of foreign direct investment in Kenya, even as Kenyan enterprises increasingly venture south in search of new markets and partnerships. In 2025, bilateral trade between our two countries reached approximately $680 million. This is meaningful progress, but it is also a measure of how much potential remains untapped. Kenya supplies tea, coffee, horticulture, cut flowers, and some manufactured goods, while South Africa supplies machinery, vehicles, pharmaceuticals, steel, and industrial inputs. Such complementarity is the very foundation for a deeper industrial cooperation and shared value chains. We will continue to eliminate the barriers that impede trade between our two countries. Let me conclude by saying Kenya remains firmly committed to its investors through reforms that ease doing business, strengthen investor protection, accelerate industrialization, and deepen regional integration. We are investing heavily in agriculture, renewable energy, affordable housing, industrial parks, and the digital economy to stand as a globally competitive destination and the gateway to the wider East and Central Africa. And we want to welcome South Africa to build with us this ecosystem. We also recognize the strategic value of closer collaboration among Africa's financial institutions, development finance institutions, pension funds, sovereign wealth funds, and private equity firms in mobilizing long-term capital. Through our National Infrastructure Fund and the Sovereign Wealth Fund, Kenya is unlocking patient capital for infrastructure, energy, logistics, housing, industry, and opening new avenues for partnership with African investors, including those from this great country. We are equally positioning ourselves as a competitive jurisdiction to domicile funds and cross-border investment structuring. In reforms to our financial ecosystem and regulatory framework, Kenya offers fund managers, private equity, venture capital, and institutional investors a gateway to deploy capital efficiently and across the continent.
Africa is the origin of humanity. Africa is the origin of talent. And Africa must now play out its capability of being able to showcase its innovation, to also, to you as business people, to be able to say, we are now going to start building real champions of our continent. And champions should not only be from the Northern Hemisphere. We want African champions as well. So discussions that we're having today here and what we have heard should really in the end demonstrate that we have capability and we can move forward as a continent and as businesses. So in our view as government, we expect a lot from you as business, just as you expect a lot from us. And where we tarry and where we slow down, we will encourage you to egg us on, to encourage us. But we would like to see the smell of the money that I've sniffed today being put on the table, being turned into factories, and going beyond just saying we've opened this branch of this bank, this branch of this company and all that. It must now be real. We must see and hear about real investments that are going to be put in place. We want to hear how you are going to create industries of the future and how you are going to become the real engines of our economy's growth. Now, this is the message that I want to leave this business forum with. And my key message is, and I'd like the officials in our government as they put the business gathering together in 2 years' time to work with you to make sure that it results in real investment pledges and commitments that will be made. Otherwise, I am not coming. Otherwise, I'll tell President Ruto that my brother, you and I will meet at the airport, and I will come back to Pretoria, and I would like to come to Nairobi to hear real commitments for investments. That is what we call on you as business people to do for our two countries. To make sure that we live up to the powerhouses of the two economies. Kenya is a powerhouse in East Africa. South Africa is a powerhouse in Southern Africa. And together, we become a greater powerhouse on our continent. Taking advantage of the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, President Ruto has correctly said, this Africa Continental Free Trade Area gives us all on the African continent an historic and unprecedented opportunity to make sure that we trade with each other, to make sure that we create business opportunities on a free tariff basis. When I know as a businessman that I can go and sell something in Egypt, something that I make in Cameroon, and the movement of what I sell is going to be facilitated by this trade agreement, that should boost my business opportunities. And when we know that, the payment systems are uniquely African and can be utilized for enhancing the businesses. So the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is the best thing after the formation of the AU. It is the best thing that our continent has come up with. It has created the greatest opportunity.